What's up, everyone? Brandon with FastDataScience.ai here, and I'm back with a new video series that I'm calling Embedded. More to come on where I got that name in a future episode. But for now, this video series is all about all things applied generative AI. And it draws on my experience in data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence that I've gained from roughly the last 15 years or so of working in the industry. And if you're looking at that picture, yeah, it's a little bit older. And saying 15 years does make me feel a little bit old. I'm not ready to update it yet. But I've gained that experience working as both a developer and a leader in the space, building artificial intelligence solutions and products, but also developing teams and organizations to support AI initiatives at large enterprises. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this first episode, which is all about trying to get more out of generative AI tools with effective prompt design, or what I'm calling prompt design 2.0. Now, if you're sitting there scratching your head wondering what prompt design is, don't worry, we'll get into that in this episode. But if you're wondering what exactly generative AI is, I would encourage you to pause the video and go check out OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Bard or Anthropic's Claude. Log into one of those user interfaces and just start experimenting. Just start asking questions. Doing so will help you start to build some intuition around what exactly these generative AI tools are really capable of. At their core, they're really good at generating language, and they do it in a way that responds contextually to the instructions that we provide it. And those instructions are what we're calling prompts. So let's go ahead and jump in to effective prompt design, or prompt design 2.0. And let's do that with a demonstration. So I actually asked ChatGPT to come up with a title for this video. And here's the title that ChatGPT came up with: Unleashing the Power of LLMs, the Art of Effective Prompt Design. Now, if that's not the most generative AI title for a video, I don't know what is. But it underlies a really important lesson, and that is that the quality of the inputs or instructions or prompts that we provide to these generative AI tools significantly impacts the quality of the outputs that those tools respond with. And in some cases, it can even influence the accuracy of those outputs, depending on the type of task that you're asking the generative AI tool to help you solve. Now, let's go ahead, before we jump into prompt design, and just quickly overview exactly what underlies these generative AI tools in the first place. So what underlies all of these generative AI tools, like ChatGPT, for example, are what are called foundational models, or large language models. These large language models are exactly that. They're models, or machine learning models, that are trained on extremely large language data sets. So, for example, in the case of ChatGPT, it's often discussed that that model was trained on all of the examples of digital language on the internet. The idea behind these machine learning models is to learn how words, or what we call tokens in the industry, how words relate to other words that they often show up with in different contexts. With their billions, and in some cases even trillions, of different parameters, and with very large data sets that show lots of different example uses of language, these large language models are able to learn a lot of the sophistication and nuance that's built into our everyday use of language. The subjectivity, the syntax, the semantics. These models are capable of extracting some of those elements to a pretty good degree, such that whenever we provide them with new instructions, these models understand what we intend for the most part and can produce a response that helps address those instructions. Now, these large language models have really demonstrated remarkable capabilities, and that is particularly in the context of generating text. And actually, even more recently, what we're seeing is multimodal large language models. That is, large language models that essentially can also generate images. So we're built on natural language, but that natural language helps that model translate an output into an actual image that we can use. We'll talk more about that in another episode, but these language models are really good at also translating languages, and I also use them often for helping me get started with coding projects. Again, think of ChatGPT, for example. It was trained on the entirety of the internet, and you can imagine there's just a great diversity of information on the internet, whether it be poetry or classical literature or science fiction, or it be actual examples of code and coding. These models learn the nuances of all of those different variations of digital expressions of communication and logic, and it's able to reproduce them with pretty good accuracy, although not perfect. So how do we make them better at what they're producing? Well, we do that by harnessing the power of prompt design. That is, really thinking about how we're prompting these particular tools in order to get better quality and, in some cases, better accuracy in the output that they provide. Now, prompt design at its most basic, or what I'll call prompt design 1.0, is actually just pretty simple. So, as I discussed, these large language models are extremely capable even as they are. That is to say, you don't really need to think too deeply about how you're organizing and engineering your prompt in order to get pretty good responses from these models most of the time. And in fact, you may have seen this infographic circulating around Medium articles or blogs or wherever it may be. But this simple prompt design will get you really good quality output 90% of the time. That is to say, if you're using generative AI for your own personal use, you don't really need to think too deeply about really architecting a sophisticated prompt, because you're going to be able to answer most of your questions, and you're probably interacting and editing the output anyways as you're working with it, helping you to quickly solve some things that would have taken you a little bit longer before had you not had the tool. So in so doing, you don't need to really think too deeply about the architecture or engineering of your prompts. We can follow a very simple set of rules. That is to say, you get pretty good output when you provide a role for the particular generative AI tool to take on. Again, what you can think of this, the way in which you can analogize what exactly it's doing to the model is, think of providing it with a role as giving it a flashlight. So if you have a generative AI model that was trained on billions of different examples of language, by telling it to take on a particular role, it takes a flashlight to all of that training to focus on a specific subset of language. So if we ask it to act as a CEO, it's going to incorporate more language that CEOs are associated with in the response that it provides you. The same thing happens when we ask the specific task that we want it to perform. Here's a great example, or a list of all the different tasks and the great diversity of tasks that these generative AI tools are able to actually perform. And then finally, we might want to give some explanation to what format we want the output to be structured as. Do we want it to be a table? Do we want it to be a bulleted list, code, whatever it may be? So this is going to get you to 90% of your needs most of the time, right? Well, 90% of the time. Yeah, I know. So it's useful to think about simple prompt design. But what about those instances where you want to actually take the output of the generative AI model and use it to scale an initiative where you're getting in front of clients every day or potential customers? You don't have all the time in the world to go through and edit every single thing that you're getting out of these generative tools. So how do we improve the quality, improve the context, improve the outputs so that we can scale things like marketing campaigns? And we do that with Prompt Design 2.0. We're going to skip this because this is something OpenAI put out that I didn't find all that useful. But essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to apply a framework that helps to add more details to our prompts that improve the quality of the outputs that we get from these generative AI tools. What I have done here is I've provided you with a framework, that is to say, a series of different sections for developing a more sophisticated prompt that influences the outputs you get from generative AI. We split it up into these different sections, so you want to make sure to define the task, define the context, talk about what kind of desired output you're looking for, provide examples if you have them, domain-specific terminology, and where possible, maybe even some creative inspiration. One thing I didn't touch on when I talked about these large language models is, because they are trained on such a large corpus, what we call a corpus of examples of different language use, these models have an understanding of lots of different domains of knowledge. And because of that, because they understand different facts about different domains of knowledge, of human knowledge, these models, and because they understand language, the nuances of how we put language together and make logical arguments, so they understand some of the nuances of logic, although things do fall apart in some places, and talk about that later. But the idea here is that they're really good at bringing together very disparate domains of knowledge in intelligible and sometimes logical ways. And that is something that I think we as humans often refer to as being creative. And so these models are really good at demonstrating creativity, inspiring creativity. And so it's often a good use of your prompt to try and imbue some of that should the example or should the specific task you're working on actually benefit from it. Okay, that was labored. Let's move on. All right, so let's talk about an example. You are a marketing professional, and your boss has asked you to develop a marketing campaign for social media. And in that campaign, you are to generate lots of social media content for, say, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you got to do it a lot, like daily. So what you need is you need to develop an effective prompt design that is something that will provide you with high quality output that you can iterate over quickly so that you can pump that content out and meet your boss's and your company's needs and increase sales and all that good stuff. So the company that you're working for is a sustainable sneaker company, a new sustainable sneaker company. By Tom's, we're in place now. Whatever we are, Sustainable Sneakers 2.0. Yeah. Okay, so now you're in charge of this marketing campaign. You're going to design a prompt using that framework that I just showed you to meet the needs of this campaign. All right, so first we define the task. Acting as a marketing expert, generate short, engaging ad copy snippets for a new line of sustainable sneakers, not sneakers, tailored to different social media platforms. Then we provide context. Notice that in the context, I also have some subsections. This is important to do, right? We're providing a framework for the way in which we're thinking about this problem, and we're sharing that with the generative AI tool. And guess what? These generative AI tools are really responsive to that organization. So here we describe the target audience, eco-conscious millennials and Gen Z consumers. Sneaker offer. So we include some information about some of the offers we want to be sort of expressed or talked about in the ad copy that's generated for these platforms. And then here we even provide it with the specific platforms that we're interested in. Now let's get to desired output. In this case, we're actually giving it with very specific instructions. We want platform-specific snippets within these character limits, and we provide those character limits. We even say we want to include hashtags for Instagram, but notice we don't say that for Facebook or Twitter. We provide information on the tone, on the messaging, and then we provide some examples. This is really powerful. We call this few-shot learning in generative AI. This is where you are essentially asking the large language model to train itself really quickly on a few examples of what are some good things and output structures that meet the needs of this particular request. And so here we have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, we have the content, we also have the character limit in parentheses. Domain-specific terminology, we can incorporate ideas that we want, language that we want to be included in these social media posts. And then finally, some creative inspiration. Not all campaigns or not all use cases will necessarily benefit from creative inspiration, but yours might. Here are some ideas for this particular example. Finally, evaluate and refine. But the idea here is to get to a place where we don't have to refine a whole lot. Okay, let's take a look at what that looks like in Google Bard. So here is my prompt 2.0 for Google Bard. Notice the sections separated by simple colons, and these generative AI tools are very good at understanding our use of punctuation in that way so that it helps to build an understanding of what kinds of output or what the output should particularly look like. I literally, just so you know, I literally just took what I had in those bullet points and copied and pasted it here. So it's that simple. So you can use that as a framework. Here is the output. Here's an example of what we got back. Sustainable sneaker ad copy snippets. Here's an Instagram. So notice it says Instagram, 2,190 characters. And then here's the actual content. Sunrise stole, check, gym grind, conquered, weekend vibes, nailed it, meet the sustainable sneaker for you, comfort, performance, style, even has hashtags, and it provides us with an example for an image. Oh my God, I'm sold. I'm taking sustainable sneaker 2.0. Bye, Tom. Okay. With all of that, know that tools like Bard and ChatGPT offer other ways of essentially refining and iterating. So you can look at different drafts, which I have here. You can ask it to include stronger imagery. You can do all kinds of additional things. Okay, so that's Prompt Design 2.0. In the next few episodes, we'll talk about meta prompting, counterfactual prompting, prompt design 3.0, if you will. Follow me on YouTube, subscribe, like all the social things. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.